Good afternoon. If you've attended any sessions at Ignite this week, you've probably heard that Microsoft's mission is to empower each and every individual and organization to achieve more. And within Office 365, that is absolutely our goal. Our intention is to allow businesses, organizations to achieve their mission, to achieve their objectives using technology. When we speak to organizations and customers and ask, what do you seek to get out of Office 365? We often hear things like, we just want to sell socks. That was a retail customer that we spoke to where their business really wasn't managing servers, patching software, racking hardware. Rather, their business is selling socks. They're a retail chain. And that is really the intention of Office 365. We want to allow organizations to collaborate, to share information, to work together. But of course, with new technology, with new features and functionality through emails and sites and all types of collaboration tools, a core function of IT has been and will likely remain for quite a long time, change management. So when we think about change management within Office 365, of course, that's what we're here to talk about. How do we communicate what is changing in the service, what is upcoming, what is new, and how do we approach that so that you as customers can take advantage of the newest functionality to further your business, to further the mission of your organization. ProSci defines change management as the discipline that guides how we prepare, equip, and support individuals to successfully adopt change in order to drive organizational success and outcomes. One of my favorite change management stories is, and near and dear to my heart, my grandfather's 95 years old, brilliant physicist. He works on nuclear power plants. And he has a cell phone, and until very recently, he turned it off when he was not making phone calls. That was how he used his phone. That's what he always did. And then someone in my family, I think it was my uncle, sat down with my grandfather and taught him that if you leave your phone on, you'll actually receive the calls as they come in. It made his life significantly easier. But he needed a little bit of coaching and a little bit of help, and also it needed to intuitively align with the way that he went about his life, the way that he's always used his phone. And that's the function of change management, is allowing people to take full advantage of the capabilities they have. He had a phone. It was a smartphone. It was a nice new cell phone, and he wasn't getting the most out of it. And that's why the change management capabilities within Office 365 empower IT organizations, empower business units and mission teams to take full advantage of all of the technology. Now, not all change is made equal, and within Office 365, we think about change in a couple of different categories. The first is brand new services and applications, things like Teams. It's a new application, a new way that you can do work, and that's something that becomes made available as part of Office 365 to organizations. Within each of the services, there's also evolution. Within SharePoint, we introduced communication sites. Within Exchange, we increased the default mailbox quota from 50 gigabytes to 100 gigabytes. And these services, because they're running in the cloud, continue to evolve. They continue to improve and introduce new capabilities that make it easier to work, to collaborate, to share information, and to secure the information within your organization as well. Now, seamlessly in the background, we also are continually improving performance and enhancing security. That's Microsoft's responsibility. We need to make sure that Office 365 is always optimized and always entirely secure. No one should ever have unauthorized access to your information. And then there's the occasional deprecations. We also communicate when action may be required to ensure compatibility of line of business apps or other applications that an organization may use. The cloud has also fundamentally shifted the way that Microsoft develops these. So these are the different categories of change, and traditionally, or historically for Microsoft, this was a 3-year release cycle. Exchange 2007, 2010, 2013, SharePoint 2016, I think we just announced 2019, which comes out in 2018. And in between that, there's service packs, cumulative updates, our favorite Patch Tuesdays. But quite frequently, organizations would even skip a server version. And then the volume of change for the users is quite significant. Going from Exchange 2007 to 2013 can be a big leap in terms of the capabilities available to end users. So with Office 365 and with the cloud model that Microsoft now uses, we've taken an approach of iterative updates. Make them smaller changes that are much more manageable for an individual, for an organization to adopt and take advantage of. And that's shifted both how Microsoft develops these. We're now building new capabilities on a rolling basis. We no longer lock down the server version every 3 years and ship what that becomes as that server version. But it also enables us to manage the service in a new way, in a different way. And what I mean by that is that Office 365 runs in what we refer to as regions. These are sets of data centers that run in a multi-way active topology. For Exchange, for example, it's running active, 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 active. And those aren't backups. Those are real-time active mailboxes with duplicates of the content. And that allows us to take servers out of rotation, patch them, and put them back in without any downtime, without any noticeable impact to the users, such that we've effectively made maintenance windows obsolete. And now, in a global service, there aren't really weekends, there aren't really night times. For global organizations, as many of you would know, there's no time that it's acceptable to fully take email offline. And it also means that we can make these capabilities available to your organizations without having to go procure new hardware. Well, Microsoft does, but your organization doesn't have to procure hardware, deploy the software, manage all the patches. That's Microsoft's responsibility. That's the evergreen model of the Office 365 services. Now, that can also be challenging. The rate of change in Office 365 is quite rapid. We're very proud of it, but we also recognize that that's a paradigm shift for organizations, for IT. We talked to one customer in particular that articulated it quite well. They said that they've decided not to micromanage the changes that are going on in Office 365, but they recognized that that can really be difficult for IT. For many, many years, many of us have been both responsible for the stability of the services provided to our users, as well as the security and availability of the servers themselves. And with Office 365, what we really want to enable is this evergreen, ongoing, updated version of the service that allows you to have the latest and greatest. It allows you to not have to worry about, do you have capacity? I sat in on the end of the last session, and then a healthcare company was talking about how they have unlimited storage with OneDrive, and so they don't actually plan for when they're about to run out of storage, because they won't. And that is a fundamental shift that really allows us within IT to go be consultants to our businesses. Within IT, we understand how our organization operates, from HR to legal to business units to product teams, and we can fully empower and enable the organization to function in this new digital world. Modern workplace, digital transformation. I know I'm using a couple of these buzzwords that we've heard this week. But what's really important to note is that although we've made it possible to not micromanage the changes, to allow Microsoft to maintain the evergreen nature of the service, it's also crucial that we communicate what's upcoming, what is changing. When people get confused, they call the help desk, they go start using consumer services, shadow IT, another one of our favorite buzzwords and least favorite experiences. And so when we think about how Microsoft develops these capabilities and then communicates them, we go through a bit of a cycle. So we start with the concept of what is it that we want to build. We invest in it, we start to build it, and once we reach the part that we're absolutely committed to releasing it, we'll put it on the roadmap, roadmap.office.com, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like, but that's the first place that we see things show up. We also use the Office blogs when it's a big, major announcement of something we're really, really excited about. Sometimes those are embargoed, so they'll go to the blog first. And from the roadmap, as it's approaching release and approaching availability for your organization, we then communicate it through the Message Center. The Message Center is an in-product, in the Admin Center UI communication channel. It's also in the mobile app. So on your mobile device, you can have the admin app installed and get push notifications, as well as a weekly digest email, and the service communication API, if you want to integrate it into another service or into a tool of your choice. And that's the process that we take. As engineering teams within the product group are developing new capabilities, they go on the roadmap. As they're approaching availability for your organization, they show up in the Message Center. Now, as they're going through these phases and becoming available to your organization, We also recognize that most companies, most customers of Office 365 want to be able to experience these before the entire organization has it roll out. And so, I'll be quite transparent here, we have found within Microsoft and through feedback from customers, the preview programs and different terminology that we use can be quite confusing. So I want to clarify that a little bit. First, by talking about the previews. We do previews within Office 365. They're supported by each program, by each product group usually as they're making available their new application or service or feature. Some of them are public, some of them are private, and depending on the team that you're working with and the actual feature, the SLA may vary. For IT enablement, we have a first release program. Within the Tenant Admin Center, you can enable first release, and what that does is it provides your organization the ability to select individuals or a secondary test tenant and say, I want these folks or this tenant to receive all of the major updates a bit earlier. We put these there. You can configure them, you can use them, build documentation, build training, prepare your end users, prepare power users. And that's where full production quality capabilities are made available earlier. The standard SLA applies, standard support channels, and you can do it for select users or a full tenant. And then after these capabilities have been in first release for a period of time, they'll reach standard release. That's when it rolls out to the entire organization. Now, with Microsoft 365, which is Office 365, EMS security services, as well as Windows 10, we realized that we had different terminology, different ways of talking about these release cycles. And so we're aligning across the entire suite so that first release will be called targeted release. In the coming weeks, you'll see that updated in the UI within the Admin Center. Documentation is being updated as well. And that's really just a name change. But we're simplifying so that across Microsoft 365, we can say that anything that is in a targeted release or a targeted channel for the Office clients is production quality, early access for IT, for power users. But it's not necessarily a preview. It is fully supported with the full SLA as well. I want to pause here and actually show what we see when we go into each of these communication channels. So the first that we mentioned was the Office 365 roadmap. It's roadmap.office.com, which also then resolves to products.office.com/business/roadmap. And here's where we communicate what's upcoming, what's being worked on primarily. You can filter, you can actually even download the roadmap as well, export it to Excel, filter and slice and dice it. All of the information that you get on the roadmap here will also start to pop up in that export. On the roadmap, we've introduced a couple of new capabilities that are quite exciting. The ability to download is really our favorite. When I refer to the message center, I've gone to my test tenant here. So I logged in, I went to portal.office.com, I clicked on the admin tile, and right front and center, I see the message center. And this is where I'm seeing the communications pop up, and we're seeing a number of these related to Ignite, in fact. And so here I'm able to come in and look at what the messages say. And as of today, this is actually the very first message, we're now able to embed videos, have rich text. So rather than having just very simple text with a whole bunch of links that point you somewhere else, we're now able to actually embed this rich text, these videos, diagrams, images. And then once you've read the message, you can go ahead and dismiss it, and it will go away. A little bit like an inbox, but it's right within the admin center. You come in here, you can see all of your messages, and we use a couple of different categorizations of stay informed, prevent or fix issues, and plan for change. You'll see some are highlighted as being particularly important. Some have dates by which action should be taken. And then we have a message center ID here. Now, one of my favorites, I want to go to my dismissed messages. One of my favorite capabilities that we'll talk a little bit more about in a couple of minutes is the ability to like or dislike a message. And when I come in here, this is fantastic. I can provide feedback. I click it's OK to contact me, and I send it. Now, that is going to the program manager, the product marketing manager, and Mike's team. of the folks that actually worked on that feature. The like and dislike, what's really helpful for us is, are we communicating the right things? Did we provide it in the right time? And was it helpful for what you needed? And that really does go to the engineering team, the marketing team that worked on that feature, and we read every single one of those. I have a colleague who was speaking in Australia at one point, and she said, we read all of the feedback that comes through. And everyone in the audience said, okay, yeah, of course, I bet you do. And so someone, after the presentation, went in and said, the blonde lady named Anne said she would read this. And Anne, who happens to be here, can attest, she responded, and the guy was a little bit terrified. But Anne responded and said, we really do read these. Thank you for the feedback. And it's true. We read every single one of these, and we also roll it up to management. We'll talk a bit more about how we use the feedback and the way that we think about the feedback we get through the message center as well. I mentioned the Office blogs, blogs.office.com. This is a little bit like a newspaper. Here's where you can find stories about new capabilities, major announcements, and then the tech community. One of my favorite places to spend time engaging with MVPs, partners, customers, other Microsoft individuals. Every session from Microsoft Ignite is being recorded. The decks will be published all through the tech community. It's a really robust community of individuals who are subject matter experts, answering questions, sharing best practices, and it's a really fantastic place to go find information and share what you've learned as well. So jumping back in. Yes, please.
What about the things that are not mentioned in the roadmap at the message center? How can we respond to that?
So the question is, what about things that aren't in the roadmap or the message center? So when we think about what to communicate in the message center and what goes on the roadmap, it tends to be, and what we seek to do, is communicate anything that would require admin attention. Data is stored in a new place. It's a new experience for users. Things like security patching in the background, performance enhancements, those aren't communicated. And essentially, the service needs to remain stable. And so if there's an incident, and incidents occur occasionally, that we communicate through the service health dashboard. And we share as something has gone wrong, here's what we're doing to work on it. If we have not communicated something that you think we should have, that's where if you go into the tech community and ask other people and share information there, we also monitor those channels. We monitor Twitter. Yeah, please.
What should you inform when you change the big things in the UI for Dell, for example?
So if we're changing big things in the UI, yes, we should communicate that. And if we miss it, that's a miss in the policy. And I'm also being a little bit coy in my answer because we're about to define exactly what we communicate, and I think it will answer that question a bit more fully. One thing that I haven't referred to or didn't show is the Message Center Digest. On a weekly basis, we roll up everything we've communicated in the last week and provide it via email. Until recently, that was available only to admins who are set for first release. But as of, I believe it was last week, it is now rolling out to all tenants. So in the coming weeks, every tenant admin will have the ability to receive the Message Center Weekly Digest. And it can also be configured so that it's sent to either the admin and or other individuals. You can use a distribution list, or my personal favorite is actually to use a group. If you create a group and have the Message Center Digest sent there, all of those individuals can see it. It's shared in, or saved in that shared space. You can create planner tasks if you want to assign things to people. I'm going to pause here and introduce Mr. Mike Ziak, who will talk a little bit more about how we listen and what we do with the information.
Thanks, Brian. So first off, thank you for coming and listening to what we think is a very exciting topic. I don't know whether that matches your experience. As a brief introduction of who we are, we have Brian, who's our marketing guy, so he gives this very polished representation of all the great features that we're delivering. We have Jeremy. Jeremy is actually an engineering manager. He's accountable for delivering the cool technology that you actually see. And then my organization is accountable for delivering those communications through the technology that teams like Brian delivers. So ultimately, you have sort of the fully accountable group of individuals up here talking to you about how we deliver change. Now, my organization is in the position of communicating all of the updates and changes that go on within the service. To the gentleman that asked the question of, hey, you did a change and you didn't tell us about it, that's my organization's accountability to understand, did we have a policy failure, or was it something that we intended not to communicate? And there are some situations where we may not, but we take a look at those. It's my organization that looks at the message center feedback when you tell us, hey, this communication sucks. Sometimes we actually have expletives that are shouted to us in message center, and we look to try and understand what we failed at and how to improve. So my job is about delivering, but it's also about listening and learning. The first thing that I want to do is sort of talk about how we deliver now in the cloud. If you think back to the olden days, you had a developer, they had a build box under their desk, they tested the release of something, then ultimately you as customers would accept that. It turns out the developer didn't run it behind a firewall and all of these other things, and so ultimately it didn't work, and so that's one of the reasons why you would wait a little while before we deployed. We are now delivering features inside of Microsoft almost on a daily basis. So our engineering teams are measured on whether they can do a full build and deployment of their service within 24 hours, and we accept those into what we call Ring 1. And this is the Microsoft Inner Ring. This has literally thousands of Microsoft employees whose jobs rely on this technology to be available, taking the release. Now, one big thing about this is that it's not running in some lab. It is actually running in our production data centers just where your data is running. It just so happens that it's an earlier release of the software that these users are getting. So we're able to validate whether it works within the network scheme, whether or not it works on devices, et cetera, in a way that approximate as best we can our user population. Now, Ring 2 is where our CIO and our CEO yell at us if we do something wrong, similar to your CEOs and CIOs yelling at you if you've done something wrong with regard to the deployment. So whereas someone like Satya may be just a wee bit more accepting of an issue, it's not really that much. And ultimately, we are accountable for delivering the productivity value to these 100+ thousand employees within Microsoft in a way that does not damage their ability to be productive. Now, Ring 3 is where you as customers come into play. If you are running first release select user, if you're an organization of anywhere over probably 500 employees, you almost always want to be doing select user. Smaller organizations may be accepting of updates just on a very liberal basis, but otherwise I would ask you, if you are a larger tenant, to sign up for first release and do it for select user so that user population can experience capabilities before it's available out to a broader audience. Because we can't test every scenario. We have over probably 3 million tenants that run on top of Office 365. Think about the permutations of usage scenarios that exist in that world of 3 million customers, literally 100 million users that are connecting to this service, and how they use it. We're not going to be able to work through every scenario. We can't do every test matrix. Whenever we have an issue in production, and we do, one of the first things that I get back as feedback from customers is, don't you test this stuff? And the answer is, yes, we do, but we don't necessarily test the 8,000 print drivers that may exist out in the world and so on. We test for as many scenarios that are core, and then we want our users to give us feedback, and we try and drive channels that improve that. Now, that's important to note when you get out to Ring 4. Ring 4, you'll see that there are actually some additional sort of curves that exist in that ring. That's because when we deploy into production, we actually do something that we call hydration. We sort of roll it out in a slow, progressive manner. We actually have algorithms that says, hey, we deployed this into Europe with this last release. We'll deploy into the US with this release, and we'll deploy it to 10% of the users, and we'll watch what happens. Now, this is because even in first release, we can't know all of the permutations that are in use within the organizations. And so we've come up with this sort of slow hydration model to understand whether or not there are uncaught scenarios within the environment and whether or not those issues are hopefully caught earlier so we can actually get them taken care of before they're out. Now, when you look at what we're doing, we're delivering 25, call it a couple of dozen new features every month. On one hand, that's kind of cool. On the other hand, that's a lot of stuff for you guys to take in. And if we're doing a poor job of it, that's a lot of disruption. And so ultimately, we have to deliver it in a way that doesn't impact you. Now, if you look at our incident rate, and our services are growing at double-digit, in some cases triple-digit growth patterns, that growth, plus if you think all of the new capabilities we're bringing in, our incident rate is flat across the service. And that's representative of the investment we're making into our ring deployment model, the channels of feedback from customers like you to tell us, are we doing a good job earlier rather than later? Ultimately, if I'm successful, I minimize the severity of impact and the scope of impact. So I don't want to take your email down, and I definitely don't want to impact all of your users. And so you'll frequently see that, yeah, we do have issues, but it's only for a certain portion of your users, not everybody. Now, that's not ideal, but it is much better than the model of, okay, we're going to blast it out. And so ultimately, we have these metrics to tell us whether or not we're headed in the right direction. Majority of issues, as we measure them, are caught in our inner ring. This is one of the scorecards that we review with our executive vice president in our executive service review. So he looks at all of this data. We represent your experience with the service, and that is captured by him, and certainly he gives his opinion if we fail in that particular area. So I want you to truly understand that the service is embedded throughout the organization. It is how we live and breathe as a corporation now, and ultimately it is embedded throughout the engineering teams as well as the management. And then when you look at the final outer ring, this is where, yeah, we do have issues show up there, but they usually are pretty small in terms of that severity of impact. And we usually end up with a few customers telling us about it. They are scenarios that we hadn't captured. We drive that feedback back to engineering to ask the question of, could you have tested for this? How do we build it into our earlier rings to be able to capture it? So ultimately, we don't repeat that failure back to you as customers. Now, as a brief interactive experience, how many people in here are customers with 1,000 users or more? Okay, that's fantastic. Okay, and I partially would expect that because change is important to you in terms of how you deploy. We, about a year, approaching about 2 years ago, we released this cool feature called Clutter. How many people remember Clutter? Okay, great, that means you've been on the service for a while. That was a disaster, to say the least, because we, in all of our inspiration and bright-mindedness, said, hey, this is a great feature, we're just going to give it to the users. And we didn't communicate it to the IT organizations, we didn't give you any controls, we just said, hey, this is a great feature, our engineers are brilliant, they came up with something great, and we gave it to you. Well, we got what was an enormous amount of feedback that said, you guys are horrible, don't you understand? I have operations that work with mail flow, you changed the mail flow on my user population without telling me, how could you do that? And we implemented something called the Change Council. This is an internal organization that my team leads that takes all major updates, remember that word major for a moment, and vets them to meet our policy with regard to timing of notification, control in place for the IT organization, et cetera. Since we introduced this, we've had close to 80 changes that come through this council. Some of them get rejected, go back to the drawing board. Hey, by the way, when you look at Teams, just as an example, they were originally going to be default on in preview. And we said, you cannot do that to our user population. Our customers need to be able to control something coming in. They need to be able to manage it within the environment. We said, make it so if it's in preview that the IT pro has a decision to make in that process. And so they came back and said, we've delivered that, and we move forward. So I call it out because it's a combination of things. We're taking your insights and we're driving them back in a common way to the engineering organizations. And then ultimately we're looking at how the services evolve, and we're telling you, as part of our model here of telling you how we operate, things that we're doing that need to consider the cloud and how the cloud exists and how your users consume those technologies. So I call this out really because I'd like you to understand that when you're giving us the feedback in Message Center and you're telling us that we're not doing a good job, That is information that feeds itself back into the council. It becomes part of the questions that we ask to make sure that we are thinking about your success as sort of the heroes. As Brian had indicated, we want to free you sort of from the bonds of this sort of mundane, is the server up and down, and oh my God, yet another change, and really be empowered because you are the experts of your corporation. You are more plugged in than any other organization within your company. You know everybody, you know how they operate, and what we want to do is we want to give you the tools and technology to be able to deliver and empower them without being straddled and dealing with the users yelling because something changed and they didn't know it. So on the Message Center, just to call out, these are some of the features. So I look at every piece of verbatim feedback that comes in between myself. I think I read almost all of them. And then I have a team that is responsible for looking. We aggregate, we categorize, and respond back. In some cases, we drive the engineering teams to provide responses. But ultimately, just to call out, these are sort of the things that people like and dislike. Well, they like when we deliver features, like, for example, you can copy file and folders from OneDrive to SharePoint. That was a requested feature. It actually came as a Message Center piece of feedback that the engineer was like, hey, that's a great idea, we'll work on it, and then came back and delivered it. Dislikes, as you could imagine, these are frequently deprecations, like, for example, when we removed support for Office 2013. And took away something like web apps because we ultimately were moving to different capabilities. Now, our commitment is to provide notification, to try and minimize impact with regard to that. Now, we do use your feedback, and again, I want to encourage you. Sometimes our communications aren't great. We didn't do a good job of clarifying what it was that we're trying to deliver. When you provide us that feedback, frequently it will be turned around in less than a day back into Message Center with an updated post. I have a very specific example. Some of you may have experienced it. This was another instance of our ingenuity where we said, we've got this great thing called groups. Why don't we auto-create a distribution list, a group, for managers that had employees of more than 20 people. And so we announced that feature and we said, hey, we're going to make your life easier. We're going to auto-create groups for all your managers. And it was one of the most viscerally responded to and disliked features that you could imagine. And within 48 hours, engineering had pulled everything with regard to it and said, thank you very much for the feedback. We're going to think about how we actually want to deliver a feature like that. So, again, internalize the fact that we are listening to your feedback. We're coming back and trying to respond in sort of cloud time, real time, as best we can to that feedback that comes in. Now, on the roadmap, I sort of look at Message Center as being your kind of magnifying glass as to what's going on. The roadmap is really more about sort of the telescope as to what's coming in the future. You all asked for a bunch of things when we presented at the last Ignite session about wanting these things, and we are working and have delivered on many of them. The ability to be able to search easily is now there, so you can filter very quickly on any particular item within it. It's published weekly. We used to do it monthly. I have an individual within my organization that works closely with the engineering team that owns the technology that feeds the roadmap. Every engineering team puts their features into a tool internal to Microsoft that actually the roadmap is extracted from. So if you think about that, this roadmap is almost as transparent as you can get because it is simply a reflection of the work that the engineers are working on and committed to delivering, and then we publish that out at the point that we feel convicted that this is actually a feature that we're going to be delivering to the customer base. We've cleaned up a lot of things. There were some inaccuracy issues in terms of things not falling off. We left things in launched forever, so we ultimately have changed that, so we start removing things after a period of time, etc. Now, as Brian had called out, the export to Excel was a big one. Customers, especially larger ones, may be separated between SharePoint and Exchange, etc. So your ability to download, filter, etc. in an Excel spreadsheet is extraordinarily important. First added, last modified tags. A lot of times you were going, hey, when the heck did this show up on the roadmap? Did you make an update to it? So we've given a tag. And customers were very strongly opinionated that it was hard to understand what was on the roadmap and when it landed in Message Center. And so now, whenever you look at a roadmap item, it has a roadmap ID. That ID transfers itself into Message Center. So if you ever see a Message Center that has a roadmap ID, you can follow that back to the roadmap and look at the roadmap post associated with it. So we're trying to give you this capability of being able to follow something coming from the roadmap into Message Center for your enterprise. And then the coming soon is something that we're going to give you a little bit of a preview of in terms of capability here. So these are things that we heard. And certainly if we miss things at the end of this session, I think we'll have some time. We're going to love to get your feedback and see if we're missing things. You wanted us to deliver communications via email. We delivered the Mail Digest. Roadmap accuracy, these are the updates that we've made. And the biggest thing was to drive the engineering teams into the engineering tools that feed the roadmap. We recently, you may have seen this, we changed the user experience when you logged in. So your users could actually click on a little thing that said, change my login experience, and they could type in their username, and then they get a second screen, which is type in the password. Now that was delivered by our Azure Active Directory team, but you don't care because it's a part of your service. And so we now have brought in Azure Active Directory into our tracking system so we don't miss something like that again. I want you to understand we are not perfect. We will make mistakes with regard to it. Our commitment is to continuously drive improvements in timeliness, targeted and accurate information. And when we fail, we will figure out what we did wrong and make the improvement against it. The ability to export the last modified tag and so on. Ultimately, every one of these came from feedback from customers like you. So again, it is so important for you to let us know when we're failing with regard to it and give us the opportunity to make the improvement rather than just sort of seethe in the fact that it wasn't done in a way that you would want. Now, the gentleman had asked about communication of changes. So certainly there is a category where we fail. We should have posted a communication, we didn't post it. One thing that we recognized when we started to post what is a lot of changes out to the Message Center was customers wanted to understand, is this a big deal or not? I don't get it. Yeah, you made this change, but is this a major change? And so we came up with this categorization of major updates. It's going to actually be published out to support.office.com. But this is the view that we take that has a set of promises that sit behind it. If we are impacting daily productivity, like adding clutter or maybe doing focused inboxes, the better and improved version of that. Changes to themes and web parts, if you think about SharePoint, increases and decreases to storage. Similarly, when we gave customers, when we went from 50 gigabytes to 100 gigabytes, again, the small company didn't mind. The large company did. I've got people on legal hold. I need to think about that. I don't want every one of my users to be having 100 gigabytes of mail. Why the heck didn't you tell me about it? And so ultimately, we added that as a result of the feedback to the major change definitions. So I won't read through all of these. I just want you to look at them, absorb them. Ultimately, via Message Center, if you see something that you think should have been a major change that doesn't sit in one of these categories, let us know, and we'll look at whether or not it makes sense to update the definition of major. Now, with major, we want to hold to a set of commitments to you. We want to give you at least 30 days notification on that change. We want to give you administrative action that you can take against that. So for example, when we introduce a service like Teams, that we tell you at least 30 days in advance, and you have time to be able to manage licenses within your organization, et cetera, for something like focused inbox, that you could turn it on or off at the administrative level, that we give you enough time to be able to take action against it. And third commitment is that we actually give you enough information to know what the heck is going on. And so ultimately, we want to make sure that the content that we deliver in Message Center is rich, that it is self-empowering for you to be able to deliver information to your end users so you're actually able to have a successful implementation of that technology. So I call this out because there are categories of changes that are not major, and we may not give 30 days notification. We may light up something new that is a minor feature within the service. It may be a roll-up because we added a couple of menu items, and those aren't worthy of a full message center post, and we will bundle those and bring those together, and we won't give you advance warning of that because, again, we want the major definition to be really the type of thing that, this item is major, and it is something that I need to pay attention to. And so with that, when we talk about major, and I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy to give you some insights into some things that are being worked on.
Thanks, Mike. So hi, I'm Jeremy D'Souza. I'm a product manager at Microsoft. I've been at Microsoft for over 10 years. I currently lead a team of both PMs and engineers that are responsible for the engineering systems for change management. That includes the tools and to basically check in and expose features to successive audiences, as well as the systems to deploy code on all our servers worldwide, and then, as you've seen earlier, the message center and first release. And so, today, I'm excited to talk to you about how we're going to improve the awareness of major updates. Both before leading up to last year's Ignite and in customer meetings, we frequently heard that major updates are a pain point for you guys. A lot of it has to do with the value of an evergreen service where we're always pushing out new updates on a regular basis. There's just a lot of features to keep up with. And so we hear that it's a lot of work for you to log in the message center and fish out which are the key changes from the ones for which perhaps you'd like to know, but you don't have to take as much action. The other element is when we do a good job of communicating, you may not have seen it, and by the time you go to first release to try it out, it may already have left. And so it's not just good enough for us to tell you about it, it's about making it easy for you to actually go and try it out, have enough time to play with it. And so on the whole, we stepped back and said, okay, what can we do from both a product experience point of view and the message center, as well as what can we build into the engineering system to ensure that whenever there's a major update, we can keep the commitments we're making to you around communication and help you get prepared for them. Oops. There we go. And so, in terms of major updates, we thought the best way to approach this is actually to make transparent and expose the life cycle of a major update. And so, any change at Microsoft, any new product feature or service that meets the criteria that you saw earlier, the definition of a major update, is going to go through a planning cycle where we think that's a great time to let you know this change is coming, here's what to expect. At some point, it's going to get developed and built, and it's ready to share in first release. That's also another good inflection point in the life cycle where you should know, hey, this feature is ready for me to play with. And finally, once it's fully integrated with all your feedback, it's going to a worldwide audience, it's generally available. That's another great time where we want you to know this change is now rolling out. And so what we've gone and done is two things. One is in terms of communication, we built a framework inside the company where all the teams, both the PMs and our marketing team, can queue up the communication that's timely for these key inflection points in the life cycle. And what happens is as developers actually check in their code and change the exposure, we're going to automatically trigger these notifications across channels. And what that means is there's going to be a post in the message center, there's going to be an email sent out for the feature, and there's also going to be an in-app notification with the Admin Center mobile app. And so we think by having these timely and critical notifications at key points, we increase your awareness. In terms of actually helping you understand the feature, we've gone and redesigned what these look like. You heard them mention earlier about video, and so we've gone and put integrated media as well as rich formatting and a sort of unified design language in terms of hierarchy as to what's the feature about, why should you pay attention to this, and what changes are expected of you in a uniform way across these different communication channels. So it should be pretty straightforward for you to kind of understand what this is about at the right time. And so if you were to click through from one of those updates and actually go into the message center, one of the key things that we wanted to do was to make major updates basically bubble up to the top of the stack. And so quite literally, we've added a carousel at the top of the message center that will always feature both major updates as well as feature changes that are at different points in maturity in their life cycle. So if you were to look up there, you would see a change that's essentially an early announcement. There'd be a change perhaps that is now in first release and one that's ready for general availability. So whenever you come here, you can see those changes separately from all the others and easily jump and navigate to them. And so the next step in any major update in terms of its life cycle is to go to first release. So we're really bullish on first release as the program where everyone can go and sign up, either their entire tenant or a group of users within the tenant, to see features first, play with them, give us feedback. And so we wanted to address a few key points with that experience. One is that when the feature gets to first release, we tell you on time, and you get the notifications, and you don't miss it. The second is we're committing to have at least a minimum 30-day period for any major update. That does not mean that all features will spend 30 days in first release. It's quite possible that many will spend more. 30 days is just the minimum. So if a team takes a new feature to first release, they'll be there for 30 days. If they get more feedback from you that they have to incorporate, they'll spend longer there. And the third is enforcement. So we've made it difficult and perhaps next to impossible for a team to sort of be agile and eager and kind of skip this process. So once they have a feature that has been, or a major update that's been tagged as major, really through the conversation with the Change Council, as you heard earlier, it's going to be marked up in the code. And when they go to say, hey, I go to first release, they have to wait 30 days before it goes forward. So that's partially how from the engineering side we want to enforce that commitment to you to be able to try features out and give us feedback. And the other thing I'll highlight in the user experience is we actually have added a live countdown in the message center post. So, if you look at the post that's up here, it's a little small, but there is a progress bar that on day one, when this feature goes to first release, would say you have 30 days left. If you go there in 5 days because you saw the mail later, it would tell you there's 25 days remaining. And at some point, it would say, hey, the preview period's over, but it's still in first release. So we're trying to make sure we're really transparent and precise about how much time you have to actually prepare for these changes and give us feedback. And the next step, of course, is when you've got a major update. It's spent 30 days in first release or longer, depending on the nature of that change, and the team feels confident they want to roll out to a broad audience. This is where we'll send a final notification, an email, a message center post saying, hey, we're ready to roll out. I want to share that, and acknowledge that we are announcing the broad rollout and not the rollout to your tenant, but that's frequently an ask we've heard and that we're considering and working through how to provide that visibility. But at this point, this is a broad notification that it's rolling out. And so is this too much information? So we know that you already have a lot of info about changes to process just by the virtue of being an evergreen service. And so if major updates communication is something that you do not want to follow, you can go to the UI around settings. It's the same settings for the change digest, and say that you want to opt out and hit the switch and opt out of major updates. And so finally, I think that everyone will get some value of this feature, even if you're not in a first release. You get the awareness of the changes coming out, but you'll get the most value if you sign up for first release and enroll a few users in as select users to see these changes. And so we provided a link in any of the communications to go and jump to the release settings and enroll your tenant or a few users in there. And I guess I'll close by saying that this is going to roll out in the next few weeks to first release initially. So we're treating the rollout of this feature like a major update, or as a major update. So a little bit of recursiveness there. And we hope that you play with it and give us any feedback if it's helpful and ways to improve it. So I'll give it back to Brian. Thank you.
I'm really excited about these things. Let's, thank you, Jeremy. It's so cool that we're introducing the rich text, the countdown timer, so that you can see when things are in first release. Go play with them, prepare your organization. It's really very cool, the progress that we're making after talking about some of these things at the last Ignite. And so just kind of looking at the timeline and really the calendar of as these things are going. We've just defined major update. We'll have it on public documentation within the next few days. And then we'll have a baseline of should this have been communicated and why was it communicated. We've aligned the release cadence, so something that we actually didn't talk about in too great of depth is Office clients now release monthly and semi-annually, and Windows releases semi-annually. We've aligned the terminology, and so we're really seeking to deliver this Microsoft 365 experience. With the communications, the Message Center Weekly Digest is now generally available. We have rich text, the ability to export the roadmap. And as we look ahead into the coming weeks, we're going to start seeing the major update UI in the Message Center and then also in the emails. We'll see the name change of first release to targeted release. And then timeframes will start showing up on the public roadmap. So on roadmap.office.com, we'll also see estimated release timelines. And as Mike mentioned, these are really best estimates being as transparent as possible. Things change. I think most of you understand that schedules shift, but we want to be really, truly as transparent as possible. And then something else that we actually have on our roadmap for the near future is a Message Center permission role for the admin center that grants rights to no other part of the admin center. This is something that we've heard a bit from organizations saying we have business units, business users, we have change managers, we have folks who should have access to the messages, to the communications, but we really don't want them to see exchange transport rules or any of the e-discovery capabilities. And so we're actively working on an admin permission that will grant you access to the Message Center. Of course, we'd be a bit remiss to not give you a little bit of homework and also plenty of time to ask questions in just a moment. I know there was at least, I think, one over here. So call to action, use first release. It'll be targeted release soon enough, but for now we'll continue to call it first release. Set IT pros, power users, admins for first release. Install the admin mobile app. We have a link to it on a later slide. And we actually also just published a white paper that describes how Microsoft IT has transitioned with the cloud. And so not just literally the migration, that part we've talked about a bit, but also how has Microsoft IT transitioned to be a service provider within Microsoft and less of a hardware and software management organization. Microsoft IT, just like many of your organizations, has shifted where we focus the resources, the investments, and it's really, really interesting to look at the way that MSIT has gone through it and see if that's interesting for your organization as well. I'll hold this up here long enough to take some pictures, but then of course the deck is published through the tech community. Number of resources around administration. We've had some great sessions throughout the week on Monday and Tuesday on what's new in admin, usage reporting. We had an incident session this morning. We have another change management session tomorrow where we'll also talk to the IT director from ABB, a large enterprise organization based in Switzerland, about how they manage change in their organization, some of the best practices and how they use the capabilities within Office 365 as they've transformed their 125-year-old company through digital transformation and use of technology. Of course, please fill out surveys. Let us know what you liked, what you want to see more of. And with that, I want to kind of open it up to questions if anyone has anything that they want to talk about or ask questions about. Yeah?
I don't know that it's really a question per se, but an observation and maybe are we seeing something wrong? So I understand the changes rolling out globally and why don't all the changes hit the same tenant at the same time? So like when the 100 gigabyte mailboxes rolled out, one person had it, another person didn't, and it makes it really difficult for user communication to say, this is coming, we just don't really know when we can tell you it's going to hit.
Yeah, so if you go back to the rings model, those little ringlets that sit in the outer ring are at the infrastructure level. And so you as a tenant, if you have a 100,000 seat company as an example, you will be spread over a large amount of infrastructure. And we don't want to blast that to that infrastructure singularly. We want it to be gradual so we actually can validate that we're not creating issues in the environment. So when I showed that, that's not at the tenant level, that's actually within the tenant in terms of how we're hydrating within. So certainly I think one of the things that we can look at is how do we give more transparency as to what that is. Hey, it'd be great if I told you that we were at 10% and 30% and so on. And we don't have any active design in that, but a lot of what Jeremy is looking at in terms of how the software is brought through the flighting system, starts to give us information that we in the future may be able to do that. But I think it's a great piece of feedback to call out. As we talk about what we're doing, the big thing is we have engineering that is fully focused on how we do change and message it, and we will keep getting better. And this is the type of thing that, we could get better at, because I can certainly understand why it would cause some confusion and frustration. Thanks.
Maybe go across.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll go like this. So we just need to make sure that there's always a queue of at least one person. Okay, go.
All right. First, I wanted to pay a compliment. The white paper that you just mentioned, where you talk about the transition from IT from servers to services, is outstanding. You guys have to check it out. I don't work for Microsoft. They didn't pay me to say this. It's a 20-minute read. It is well worth your while.
Wait, hold on. Let me get out some money here. Thank you.
No.
Oh, that might
No,
not
I
be enough.
literally, I literally read it on the way here, and it's really, really good. It talks about managing IT in this new world. So managing change, we have the message center, we have the digest, we have all these venues. What I'm trying to foster in my IT group is using the tools. So we're trying to get people to use Yammer. So what a great use case, and I know you can kind of hack this, or you can use Flow to do this, but the stuff that comes into the message center, why couldn't we feed it to a Yammer group where we could all discuss it? And yeah, could you do it with the email? Well, you can do the digest, but that's all of them. So what I'm doing right now is I'm copying and pasting every message into a Yammer post. Now, could I hack it and Yammer it or Flow it? Maybe, but just suggestion.
So that's a great suggestion. I have a couple of thoughts on that, and one of them is that I don't want to overcommit here, but there is a member of Jeremy's team who is working with a member of the planner team on how we can set up Flow to pull Message Center communications into, say, Planner, and that would also directly accrue to putting it in Yammer or something like that. So I love the thought, and so that's exactly kind of how we're starting to think about this a little bit, is how do we also make this extensible so that the Message Center is, and in many cases it may not be specifically the end users you want to provide it to, but maybe an IT member within a business unit. And the other thing that we think about a lot within Microsoft is how do we further enable you to actually just provide the, I don't want to say documentation, but learning material. That's something we're looking at a lot with LinkedIn, for example. And Yammer is a great way to distribute information in kind of that network manner. So nothing specific that we can share that we have in upcoming, but I love the way you're thinking. That's exactly.
Extensible is exactly what I'm thinking. Like you said, well, you can export this to Excel, and I'm thinking, why isn't it an XML file that we can subscribe to, or a SharePoint list or something like that?
Yeah.
You mentioned LinkedIn Learning. Question, so if Microsoft owns LinkedIn and LinkedIn Learning and Linda, why is all the great training on there? Why do you have to pay for it? Mic drop.
Is there a session on LinkedIn?
Go ahead. Indeed.
Yeah, I want to generally say I think all these things you're doing are great, fantastic, long overdue, so thank you for that. I do want to echo also that I would love to get more visibility on the rollout of features within my tenant, because I never know when something, I mean, it's kind of tough as is. When a change is coming, I have to know, see, is this a OneDrive client that auto-updates every 2 weeks, or is this Office Pro Plus, Office Pro Plus, where we have a 4-month delay? So when does that mean we're going to hit, and when is this going to hit on the web? It's hard for me to figure out what's going on for our users. So on this new permission level you're going to add for the Message Center, which great, will this work in the Office 365 admin app as well?
That's a good question. We'll probably need to follow up to confirm that. I'm not sure the permission model for the admin app offhand. If any of the Microsoft people happen to know whether the RBAC roles work in the admin app,
I'm not sure.
We'll need to follow up
Yeah, I
on
think
that.
that's a good one for us to follow up.
Yeah, I think on a related note, being able to see alerts in the admin app, because I'm a global admin, but just to be extra cautious, I don't want to log into that admin app on my phone, even though you can put all these extra pins and stuff on there. But I would like to be able to get just to the Message Center and to the alerts.
For the Message Center role, is your question if you can assign it in the app, or if you can actually, if it will be restricted in there as well?
Yeah.
I just want to be able to
Yeah.
view the messages in the app, messages only without other administration.
Yes, we'd have to follow up on that, but it should. I mean, yeah, it should definitely. If not, it has to. yeah.
Yeah.
But thanks for flagging that, because I do want to find out myself. But to the question about LinkedIn Learning, actually, we just released some of the LinkedIn Learning courses around Office 365 administration. They are becoming available for admins, the majority of the lessons in each course. So at least around that, we are actually giving you some free access there.
And I would call out to your concern, certainly if you're an admin that has the keys to the kingdom walking around on your mobile app, one thing to consider, it's not ideal. There is a service admin role. The worst they can do is they can submit a support case as an example, but that gives them access to Message Center and to the Service Health Dashboard without having permissions to add users, delete users, and so on. So you may want to create a user that's a service admin. It's a horrible name because it's like, hey, I'm a service admin. It's like, no, you actually have no admin of the service. You just get to look at a few things. So we didn't name that one well. I just call out that that is a role that actually delivers on a little bit. It's not ideal, which is why we're looking at creating this different role. So we're going to switch back.
One last,
yeah, go ahead.
if I could, one last comment on kind of the, when is this coming to my tenant? Because that's something we hear quite frequently and are looking at very, very seriously in terms of fully enabling kind of that visibility. One other way that we think about it in many cases is during first release, so Teams, for example. When Teams was in preview, and then when many new services go through first release, it can be configured at that time such that if you unlicense your users, it won't actually release to them at the standard release timeframe. Then when you're ready, you reapply the licenses, and you can actually create your own rings of deployment, so to speak. If you apply the licenses back for only IT, it'll be available to just IT and not the rest, and then you can start to roll it out in other ways. So it actually can give you a bit more control in that way so that you can decide, this is when we're ready for my tenant.
Yes, sir.
That last part answered part of my question, but the other, but we've talked a lot about deployment. We haven't talked about user voice at all. So can you tell us where user voice fits in and feeds the whole front end of this one for suggestions and demands of how this works into this?
That's a good question.
So is the question how user voice feeds into the product development process?
Yeah,
Correct.
you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so essentially we go through, I'd say planning at least once a quarter, and there's even smaller cadences within that. And at that point, we're considering a whole range of inputs. It's not actually limited to the message center itself. User voice is part of that, market research, user focus groups. So every channel that we have, and there are many, if you choose to send us feedback, there is someone listening and reading it, synthesizing it, and then feeding those suggestions in.
Can you explain user voice for folks who may not be familiar?
User voice is essentially a website where you can go and make suggestions. You can see where other folks have made feature suggestions, ask questions, and then often a member of the product group will respond and say, hey, we've acknowledged that, it's been added to the roadmap, or there's a reason why we're not going to go do that. That's also something which happens on user voice.
Yeah, awesome.
Other question? Oh, we've got one at the middle mic here.
Sure. So going back to the message center and the new option, I have a lot of, because I'm right now, I'm filtering through those messages and I'm picking out the ones I think are pertinent to people and disseminating them. I'd love to be able to give people access to that, but there's quite a few options that pop up in there that I don't want people to know about, frankly. So is there, like even just a share option or something instead that would make it easy that I could give out specific messages there without giving them all of them?
We do have a share option. Is that recognition? Exactly. So within the admin center, if I come here and click share, I probably shouldn't do that on this is not my machine. Had Outlook been set up, it would have created an email with the content, and then you can share that over. That's also where some of the things with potentially using Flow to pull them into other areas where you can control access a little more specifically. That's a really good point in that when we look at the message center, and this is a real message center, so we'll see what pops up in terms of the newest messages. But some of these are absolutely appropriate for an entire company. Some of them a little bit less so. We've been working on some scenarios that you may not want shared too broadly. So I think that's a really good point, something that we probably need to think about a little bit more. One of the other things that I just noticed here that we didn't mention is that within the Message Center preferences, you can filter it on a per admin basis so that if you only care about Exchange or only care about SharePoint, you can basically suppress everything else. And then also, that's where you can configure the weekly digest and the new major update emails. once that rolls out.
We've got another one in the middle here.
Yeah.
So this is leading 3-2, I think, right now.
Exactly. I was thinking more about the strategic roadmaps. We have a business need where we need to have strategic roadmaps for our business and aligning that with our IT business roadmaps. So it's really hard when we only get like, this might be coming in the next quarter and this might be coming in the next 2 quarters and then, ooh, it's here. So we need to know where we're going on the long-term perspective. So what do you think about that?
I think that's really good feedback. I would say that that's somewhere in between, and this is something that we need to maybe rationalize and internalize a little bit, is that we do need to provide kind of product strategy roadmaps, kind of exactly like you're saying. When we think about Teams becoming the UC solution, how should I think about that? Is that 10 years out? Is it 1 year out? Now it's neither of those actually, but how should I think about the evolution of email and groups? We do think about the roadmap as communicating some of that, but being a little bit more tactical. The Office blog is where we'll communicate a little bit more, but I think even as I'm talking, the feedback that I would give myself is I need one place that really just tells a story. So I think that's very good feedback, and that is something that we actually do hear relatively frequently is not necessarily quite in this phrasing, but I'm planning my 3-year IT plans. What should I be planning for or budgeting for or not budgeting for? So I think that's really good feedback, and that's where the other way where we do seek to support that a little bit is through the Microsoft account teams. If any of you have Premier agreements or a technical account manager, that's what I guess candidly I was a technical account manager for about 6 years, and I would work with my customers and plan what are their strategic initiatives, and then help plan, work through the roadmap, bring together some of those resources to help tell that story and make those plans. But I think it's good feedback that is an area where the roadmap itself isn't going to stand alone, nor is the message center.
Yeah, I think it's really good what you said about the product roadmaps, because how would we align Office groups compared to Teams? Are they going to merge in together? Are they not? Should we set up this whole work about, what's our roadmap? So it's really good that you are thinking about it at least. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? We have a few minutes. If there aren't direct questions, we'll still be up here collecting our things if you want to ask us anything. And I think with that, we'll say thank you very much for coming. And again, we'll be up here for a few minutes at the end if you have some direct questions that you'd like to share.
Yeah, thank you very
Thanks.
much.